I am Amelia, 34, a self-made tech entrepreneur who built my app development company from scratch. Growing up with financial struggles, I poured my heart and soul into creating success, working tirelessly for years while my family cheered me on. Or so I thought. Nothing prepared me for that devastating moment when I overheard them discussing me as nothing but a walking wallet. That day changed everything, forcing me to make the most heartbreaking decision of my life. If you're watching this and wondering about family loyalty versus self-preservation, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to make difficult choices about toxic family relationships. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, where the constant drizzle matched our financial situation. My father Thomas worked as a manager at a local hardware store, while my mother Diana taught part-time at an elementary school. We weren't poor, but there was always a careful calculation behind every purchase, a constant awareness of budget limitations that shaped my childhood. My younger brother James, now 30, and sister Sarah, now 28, completed our family of 5. We shared bedrooms, hand-me-down clothes, and the unspoken understanding that extras were rare treats, not expectations. Despite the financial constraints, my parents emphasized the importance of education and encouraged our individual interests. For me, that interest was computers. I was fascinated by technology from the moment my school got its first computer lab. While other kids played outside after school, I begged to stay late working on simple programs and teaching myself coding from borrowed library books. My parents didn't understand my passion, but they supported it as best they could, even though a home computer was beyond our budget for many years. By the time I hit high school, I was working weekends at a local coffee shop and evenings babysitting, saving every penny toward college and my dream of working in tech. My parents praised my work ethic, often telling relatives, "Amelia has always been the responsible one." At the time, I took it as a compliment, not recognizing it would later become an expectation that would shape our entire relationship. Despite our financial limitations, we were genuinely close during those early years. Friday night board games were sacred in our household, with Mom making homemade pizza, while Dad created elaborate tournaments that left us laughing until our sides hurt. James always chose the race car in Monopoly, while Sarah insisted on being the banker. Those moments felt pure, untainted by the financial expectations that would later infiltrate every interaction. We shared responsibilities too. I helped James with math homework. Sarah assisted Mom with dinner, and we all pitched in when Dad needed help at the hardware store during inventory weekends. There was a sense of teamwork, of facing life's challenges together, rather than as individuals pursuing separate agendas. One particular memory stands out vividly. When I was 16, I had saved $300 toward a basic computer. The night before I planned to make the purchase, Dad came home looking defeated. His car had broken down, requiring expensive repairs we couldn't afford. Without hesitation, I offered my savings. The pride in his eyes as he hugged me and promised to pay me back someday felt worth more than any computer. He never did repay that money, but at the time it didn't matter. Family took care of family. Everything changed during my junior year of high school when Dad experienced his first heart attack. He was only 45. The medical bills piled up despite insurance, and suddenly our financially precarious situation became dire. Mom took on additional teaching hours, I worked more shifts at the coffee shop, and even James and Sarah contributed from their allowances and birthday money. During those long nights at the hospital, sitting beside Dad's bed while he slept, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday, I would make enough money to ensure my family never worried about medical bills or car repairs again. I would be successful enough to take care of them all. It became my driving motivation, this promise made in a sterile hospital room under the harsh fluorescent lights, while watching my father's chest rise and fall. What I couldn't understand then was how this well-intentioned promise would eventually transform into chains that would bind me to years of financial manipulation. How my desire to help would become an expectation, then a demand, and finally an entitlement in their eyes. But in that moment, it was simply love, pure and uncomplicated. The years following Dad's heart attack brought additional financial strains. Mom developed migraines from the stress Sarah needed braces, and James required tutoring for his learning difficulties. I took on the role of part-time parent, helping with homework, cooking meals, when Mom worked late, and becoming the emotional support for my siblings when our parents were too exhausted to fulfill that role. By graduation, I had learned valuable lessons about responsibility, hard work, and sacrifice. What I hadn't learned were the equally important lessons about boundaries, self-care, and the dangers of becoming indispensable to people who might someday see your value primarily in what you could provide, rather than who you were. As I accepted my high school diploma, graduating near the top of my class, despite my work schedule, my family cheered the loudest. Dad, still weakened from his health issues, but beaming with pride, gave me a card that read, "You're going to change the world someday, and we'll be right there with you." The words would prove prophetic, though not in the way any of us imagined at the time. That summer before college, we enjoyed one last season as the family I would always remember fondly. Weekend trips to the lake, backyard barbecues with neighbors, and long conversations on the porch during warm evenings. There was an innocence to our relationship, then a genuine connection unspoiled by the financial dynamics that would later emerge. In my mind, I often returned to that summer wondering if those connections were as authentic as I perceived them, or if the seeds of what was to come had already been planted. When my acceptance letter to a prestigious computer science program arrived with a partial scholarship, my family celebrated as if we'd won the lottery. The scholarship covered about 60% of my tuition, which was a blessing, but left a significant amount still needing to be covered. My parents sat me down and explained they simply couldn't contribute to my education financially. Instead of disappointment, I felt determination. I would find a way. College life quickly became a delicate balancing act between academic excellence and financial survival. I worked mornings at a campus coffee shop, afternoons in the computer lab as a teaching assistant, and weekends at a local restaurant. Sleep became a luxury, not a necessity, as I maintained my GPA while earning enough to cover tuition payments and minimal living expenses. During my freshman orientation, I met Professor Harrison, who would become my mentor and greatest advocate. After reviewing my first coding project, he called me to his office. I feared criticism, but instead found opportunity. "This work shows exceptional promise," he said, peering over his glasses. "I have a research position available. It pays, and more importantly, it will give you experience no classroom can provide." That position became my lifeline, not just financially, but intellectually. Professor Harrison pushed me beyond what I thought possible, challenging my approaches and encouraging innovation rather than mere competence. Under his guidance, I began developing my first app during junior year, a simple program to help students organize research citations more efficiently. Meanwhile, the dynamics at home were subtly shifting. During my monthly calls with my parents, the conversation increasingly turned to financial matters. Dad's medical issues continued, requiring specialized medications not fully covered by insurance. Sarah was planning to apply to colleges and worried about tuition. James had dropped out of community college after one semester, claiming it wasn't the right fit and was between jobs more often than employed. "If only we had a little extra to help your brother get on his feet," Mom would sigh during our calls. "He just needs a fresh start, maybe in a different apartment, away from those friends who are a bad influence." Each suggestion came with the unspoken expectation that, as I moved closer to a lucrative career, I would naturally want to solve these problems. And truthfully, I did want to help. These were the people who had raised me, supported my dreams, even when they didn't understand them. What was the point of success if not to share it with the people I loved? During my senior year, my citation app caught the attention of several professors who encouraged me to market it more broadly. With Professor Harrison's guidance, I expanded its functionality and launched it for the wider academic community. The modest income it generated allowed me to send my first help money home, $500 toward Dad's medical bills. The gratitude in his voice when I told him made every sleepless night worth it. I graduated with honors, my family cheering wildly from the audience. "That's my daughter," Dad called out when I crossed the stage, his voice breaking with emotion. The moment felt perfect validation for all the sacrifices and hard work. Several top tech companies had recruited me, and I accepted a position with an industry leader in Seattle. The starting salary was more money than my parents had ever made, combined a fact that both filled me with pride and created a strange new dynamic when I shared the news. "Well, look at you," James said, punching my shoulder at my graduation dinner. "Little sis is going to be rolling in cash. Don't forget about the little people when you're famous, okay?" It was said jokingly, but there was something in his tone, a mixture of pride and resentment, that made me uncomfortable. Sarah quickly added, "Maybe you can help with my wedding someday," laughing as if it were a joke, though she wasn't even dating anyone seriously at the time. My first year at the tech company was exhilarating and exhausting. I excelled at my role, earning a reputation as someone who could solve problems others couldn't crack. Nights and weekends, I continued developing my own ideas, knowing that someday I wanted to create something truly mine. The requests from family began subtly at first. James needed a loan for a car down payment after his old vehicle died. "Just until I get my next job," he promised. Sarah wanted help with college expenses when her scholarship fell through. Mom hinted that their 20th anniversary was approaching, and they had never been able to afford a proper vacation. Each request seemed reasonable on its own. Each came with promises of repayment or assurances that this was a one-time need. I was making good money, living modestly myself, and could afford to help. It felt good to be able to solve problems for the people I loved, but the one-time needs became regular occurrences. The loans were never repaid. And with each fulfilled request, the gratitude diminished while the expectations grew. When Sarah got engaged to Bradley after a whirlwind 6-month romance, she immediately called me before even telling our parents. My heart swelled thinking she wanted to share this special moment with me first because of our close bond. Instead, she launched into descriptions of her dream wedding, complete with a reception at the art museum, a designer dress, and a honeymoon in Bali. "Bradley's parents can't contribute much," she explained, "and you know Mom and Dad don't have anything to spare. But you're doing so well now. And what's the point of having a successful sister if she can't help make her only sister's wedding dreams come true?" The manipulation was so skillful, I almost missed it, wrapped as it was in compliments and appeals to sisterly love. I agreed to help with some expenses, thinking it would be a reasonable amount. The final bill came to over $25,000, more than a quarter of my annual salary after taxes. When I expressed concern about the mounting costs, Sarah tearfully accused me of trying to ruin her special day. "I thought you'd be happy for me," she sobbed. "Everyone else in your position would help their family without making them feel guilty about it." I backed down, wrote the checks, and smiled in all the wedding photos. The day was beautiful, and Sarah was radiant, but something had shifted in our relationship. A transaction had occurred, and we both knew it. Meanwhile, James had cycled through 3 more jobs and was now talking about starting his own business. Though the concept changed weekly, from a food truck to a clothing line to an event planning service. Each idea came with hints that with just a little capital investment from me, he could finally find his path to success. My parents began discussing retirement, despite being only in their 50s, with Dad casually mentioning properties they were considering in warmer climates. "Nothing fancy," he assured me. "Just a modest place where we can enjoy our golden years without these Seattle winters aggravating my condition." The requests became more frequent, the amounts larger, and the gratitude increasingly replaced with expectation. A growing unease settled in my stomach, but I dismissed it as ungenerous thinking. After all, family helps family. Isn't that what I had always believed? After 3 years of corporate work, I had saved enough and developed a business plan solid enough to take the leap into entrepreneurship. My exit interview with my supervisor at the tech company was telling. "We hate to lose you," she said, "but I've watched you build this idea nights and weekends for years. You're ready." Launching my own app development company required every ounce of courage and capital I had accumulated. I secured modest funding from angel investors who believed in my vision for creating more accessible data security solutions for small businesses, a market segment largely ignored by the major players. Those first months were a blur of 18-hour days, instant ramen meals at my desk, and the constant roller coaster between exhilarating progress and terrifying setbacks. I converted my small apartment's second bedroom into an office and hired my first 2 employees. Brilliant programmers who believed in the mission enough to accept below-market salaries in exchange for equity. 6 months in, we had a breakthrough. Our security protocol found a way to provide enterprise-level protection at a fraction of the typical cost, making it accessible to small businesses that had previously been priced out of proper cybersecurity. When we unveiled the product at a regional tech conference, the response was overwhelming. Orders began flooding in faster than our small team could process them. By the end of our first year, we had grown to 15 employees. By year 2, we had 50 and had moved into real office space in downtown Seattle. Our client list expanded from local businesses to regional chains, then to national companies, looking for more cost-effective security solutions. Industry publications featured our innovative approach, and competitors began attempting to reverse engineer our protocols. Financial success followed the professional recognition. My salary increased exponentially, and my equity in the rapidly growing company represented wealth I had never imagined possible coming from my modest background. For the first time in my life, I could make purchases without calculating the impact on my budget for months afterward. I moved into a beautiful waterfront apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed views of Puget Sound. After years of driving a used car held together with hope and duct tape, I purchased a luxury vehicle, a sleek silver sedan that still made me pause every time I approached it in a parking lot, momentarily thinking I was heading towards someone else's car. These visible symbols of success seemed to trigger a renewed interest from my family in my daily life. Phone calls became more frequent. Casual drop-ins at my office or apartment happened regularly. Each visit included compliments about my accomplishments, followed inevitably by mentions of their own financial challenges or unfulfilled dreams. Mom and Dad began sending listings for vacation properties. Just thinking this would be perfect for family gatherings. The emails would read, "Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a place where we could all come together for holidays?" James, now between his 7th and 8th career paths, arrived at my office one afternoon without appointment, a polished business proposal in hand. "I've finally found my true calling," he announced, outlining a plan for an exclusive men's grooming product line. "All I need is startup capital. Think of it as an investment opportunity between siblings." Sarah and Bradley, now expecting their first child, sent floor plans for houses in Bellevue, one of Seattle's most exclusive suburbs. "We need to think about good school districts now," Sarah explained, during a lunch she'd invited me to, where she ordered the most expensive items on the menu, before casually sliding the real estate printouts across the table. Even extended family members who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous gatherings now found reasons to connect. Cousin Megan, who had ignored my friend requests on social media for years, suddenly wanted to catch up over coffee. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, who had once told me computers were just a phase, now called regularly to discuss my amazing business acumen and mention his son's college tuition challenges. The pattern was impossible to ignore, yet I continued to respond with generosity. I helped fund James's new business venture, knowing in my heart it would likely fail like the others. I contributed to the down payment on Sarah and Bradley's new house, a sum that significantly exceeded what I had planned to spend on my own first home. I took my parents on a luxury cruise for their anniversary, upgraded their cars, and paid off their remaining mortgage. Each gift was accepted with initial effusive gratitude that quickly transformed into discussions of what might come next. The goalposts continuously moved further away, the needs always expanding to match or exceed my growing resources. During this period, I began seeing Dr. Winters, a therapist recommended by a fellow entrepreneur, who had recognized the signs of burnout in me before I acknowledged them myself. In her calm office with its soothing blue walls, I found myself hesitantly sharing the dynamics with my family. "Have you considered establishing clearer boundaries around your financial support?" she asked during one session, her voice neutral but her expression concerned. The question made me physically uncomfortable. "Their family," I replied, as if that explained and justified everything. "They supported me when they had nothing. How can I not help them now that I have more than enough?" "Support comes in many forms," Dr. Winters noted, "and healthy relationships involve mutual respect and boundaries even among family members." I dismissed her concerns, convinced she didn't understand the special bond we shared. Yet her words lingered surfacing in my thoughts during late nights when I reviewed my personal finances and realized how much was flowing outward to family rather than toward my own future security or philanthropic goals I had once been passionate about. The wake-up call should have been the conversation with my financial advisor Maxwell, who pointed out that I had given away nearly 30% of my after-tax income the previous year. At this rate, he said gently, you're compromising your own long-term financial health. Even with your current success, these aren't sustainable outflows. Still, I made excuses. They need it more than I do. It's temporary until they get on their feet. What kind of person would I be if I didn't help my own family? The truth I couldn't yet admit to myself was that something fundamental had shifted. The genuine joy I once felt in being able to help had been replaced by a sense of obligation tinged with resentment. The warm thanks had been replaced by expectations and strategically timed requests. What had once felt like love now felt increasingly transactional. Despite these warning signs, I pushed forward with plans for a family reunion at a luxury lake house I had recently purchased as a weekend retreat. It would be a chance to reconnect, to remember the bonds that had nothing to do with money. Perhaps away from the daily financial pressures, we could find our way back to the authentic relationships I remembered so fondly. I had no idea that weekend would shatter every illusion I had carefully maintained about my family's love for me. I arrived at the lake house early Friday afternoon, several hours before my family was expected. I wanted everything to be perfect. Each guest room prepared with personalized welcome baskets, the refrigerator stocked with everyone's favorite foods, activities planned that would appeal to each family member. This weekend was my attempt to recreate the closeness we had once shared, to move beyond the financial dynamics that had increasingly defined our relationships. The caretaker had prepared everything according to my instructions, so I had time to take a walk along the shoreline, gathering my thoughts before everyone arrived. The property was stunning. 5 bedrooms overlooking the crystal waters of Lake Washington, with a private dock boathouse, an expansive deck perfect for family gatherings. I had purchased it just 3 months earlier, partly as an investment, but mostly with these family weekends in mind. I returned to the house around 4 o'clock, expecting to have another hour of solitude before anyone arrived. As I approached the back entrance through the garden path, I heard voices coming from the open kitchen window. My family had arrived early, apparently led in by the caretaker. Rather than call out immediately, I paused, smiling at the sound of their familiar voices, thinking how pleasant it was that they were already making themselves at home. That's when I heard my name followed by laughter. Something in the tone made me freeze in place. Amelia has always been so predictable, my father was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the window. Work hard, save your money, plan for the future. Good thing for us she didn't inherit my spontaneity gene, or we wouldn't be enjoying our early retirement. My mother laughed. Remember when she sent us that budgeting app last Christmas, as if we needed to budget now that we have our own personal ATM? More laughter, including my brother's distinctive snort. Speaking of which, I need to talk to her about the next phase of my business. The first round of funding is almost gone, and the investors are getting antsy about returns. Did you actually get investors? Sarah asked, her voice sharp with surprise. Well, no, James admitted. But Amelia doesn't need to know that. She thinks this body scrub idea is taking off. Just needs a little more runway, I'll tell her. Another year of development before we see profits. You're too obvious, Sarah replied. You need to be subtle like me. Bradley and I are thinking about having another baby. Amelia was so generous with the nursery for Zoe. Imagine what she'll do for baby number 2, especially if we hint at financial strain from the first one. I felt physically ill, like the ground beneath my feet had suddenly disappeared. My hand reached out to steady myself against a garden trellis, causing the structure to creak slightly. Did you hear something? My mother asked. I held my breath, willing myself to be silent, needing to hear more even as each word cut deeper. Probably just the caretaker, my father replied dismissively. So what's the plan for this weekend? I want to talk to Amelia about that cruise we've been looking at. 14 days Mediterranean stops. They have these butler service suites that look amazing. Thomas, we agreed to wait until Sunday for that, my mother chided. First, Sarah needs to discuss Zoe's private preschool tuition. Then James presents his business expansion. Then we bring up the cruise. We don't want to overwhelm her all at once. "You all are thinking too small," came another voice. Uncle Robert. I hadn't even realized he was invited. Has anyone discussed her estate planning? A successful unmarried woman with no children. She needs to be thinking about her legacy. We should be positioning ourselves now for when that becomes relevant. "Robert, that's ghoulish," my mother said, but she was laughing. "She's only 34. All I'm saying is opportunities come to those who plan ahead. A little guidance toward family-focused estate planning now could make a big difference later." I couldn't listen anymore. A wave of nausea hit me so strongly I had to crouch down my head between my knees, breathing deeply to keep from vomiting in the garden. The conversations replayed in my mind. Personal ATM, positioning ourselves, the coordinated sequence of financial requests they had planned for what I had thought would be a weekend of genuine connection. When I could finally stand again, I moved silently away from the house back down to the dock, where I sat staring at the water trying to process what I'd just heard. My entire understanding of my family relationships was unraveling. Every memory was being re-examined through this new lens. Had it always been this way? Had I been nothing but a resource to them all along? I thought of all the times I'd worked late into the night, pushing myself beyond exhaustion to build my company, taking pride not just in my own accomplishments, but in being able to make life better for my family. I recalled the genuine joy I'd felt, writing those first checks to help with Dad's medical bills, James's business attempts, Sarah's wedding and house down payment. I had never once considered those transactions as anything other than expressions of love. Now I wondered if they had ever seen me as anything more than a wallet with legs. The thought brought fresh waves of pain so intense they were almost physical. My chest felt tight, each breath requiring conscious effort. I've never felt so alone, despite being surrounded by beautiful things I had acquired partly to impress the very people who were now mocking me inside. After an hour of sitting in stunned silence, I made a decision. I would not confront them immediately. Instead, I would pay attention to every interaction throughout the weekend with new awareness. I needed to know if what I'd overheard was an aberration or the truth they normally kept hidden from me. I composed myself, splashed water on my face from the lake, and walked back to the house, plastering on a smile as I called out, "Hello, I'm back. Did everyone arrive okay?" What followed was one of the most painful weekends of my life. Now that my eyes were opened, I couldn't stop seeing the patterns, the strategic compliments always followed by hints of needs, the sudden interest in my business when the conversation had drifted too long without financial topics, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the knowing glances exchanged when someone successfully extracted a promise of support from me. Each meal became an exercise in emotional archaeology, excavating the true motivations beneath seemingly innocent questions. "How's the new product launch going?" Wasn't genuine interest in my work, but a probe for information about my current cash flow. "You seem tired," wasn't concern for my well-being, but a setup for suggestions about vacation properties I could purchase that the whole family could use. I played along, pretending nothing had changed, agreeing to discuss various financial opportunities throughout the weekend, all while documenting each interaction in notes on my phone when I was alone. I noticed how rarely anyone asked about my happiness, my health, my dreams beyond business success. The questions were almost exclusively about what I was doing building or earning, never about who I was or how I felt. By Sunday morning, I had filled pages with observations, each more damning than the last. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. In their eyes, my value was measured in dollars and cents, not love or connection. I was a resource to be strategically mined, not a daughter or sister to be cherished. That night at our final dinner together, I would confront them with what I had learned. The thought filled me with equal parts dread and determination. Whatever happened next would forever change our family dynamic, but I couldn't continue living in this painful illusion. I spent Sunday afternoon in my room ostensibly working on urgent business emails, but actually preparing for the conversation ahead. I outlined key points, anticipating denials, and preparing responses. The lake house's comprehensive security system had captured audio from the kitchen on Friday. While I felt uncomfortable using recordings made without their knowledge, I needed irrefutable evidence should they attempt to gaslight me about what had been said. For the final dinner, I had arranged for the caretaker's wife, an excellent cook, to prepare a lavish meal featuring everyone's favorites. Filet mignon for Dad, seafood pasta for Mom, vegetarian lasagna for Sarah, and bourbon-glazed pork for James and Uncle Robert. Top-shelf wine flowed freely, and the conversation was lively as everyone recounted highlights from the weekend activities. As dessert was served, a decadent chocolate cake that Mom had been praising since her first bite, I gently tapped my glass with my spoon, calling for attention. 5 expectant faces turned toward me, smiles in place, entirely unaware of what was coming. I want to thank everyone for coming this weekend. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. It's given me a valuable opportunity for reflection about our family relationships. It's been wonderful, Mom said, reaching for my hand across the table. So generous of you to provide all this. That word, generous, twisted something inside me. It had once made me proud to hear it applied to my actions toward my family. Now it highlighted the transactional nature of our relationship. Actually, I continued, withdrawing my hand subtly. I've been thinking about generosity and what it means, about giving and taking, about love and what form it takes in families. A slight tension entered the room. Glances were exchanged. Dad cleared his throat. "Sounds serious, pumpkin," he said, using my childhood nickname that normally would have warmed my heart. "Everything okay?" "No," I said simply. Everything is not okay. I arrived early on Friday and overheard a conversation in the kitchen. A conversation about me, about how I'm your personal ATM, about strategies for extracting more money from me this weekend. The silence that followed was absolute. 5 faces registered different variations of shock and dismay. Mom's hand flew to her throat. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. Sarah looked at James accusingly, as if blaming him for speaking too loudly. "I don't know what you think you heard," Mom finally said, her voice trembling. "But you clearly misunderstood. We would never—" I held up my hand. "Please don't. I heard every word clearly. But even if I hadn't, this weekend has confirmed everything. I've been paying attention to every interaction, noting how quickly conversations turn to my finances, to what I can provide, to what you need from me." "That's not fair," James protested. "We talk about lots of things." "Do we?" I asked, looking directly at him. "What did you ask me about today, James?" "You wanted to know if I was considering investing in commercial real estate because you have a great opportunity for me. Yesterday, it was expansion capital for your business. Friday night, it was connections to potential distributors. Not once did you ask about my health, my happiness, my personal life." "That's not true," Sarah jumped in. "I asked about your dating life over lunch yesterday." "Yes, you did," I acknowledged. "And within 5 minutes, you were showing me private preschool brochures for Zoe, mentioning how Bradley's bonus might not come through this year. Every personal question is a prelude to a financial request. Every single one." Dad pushed his plate away, his expression hardening. "I think success has changed you, Amelia. You've become suspicious and ungenerous. We're family. Families help each other. When your mother and I were struggling to make ends meet, we still found ways to support your dreams." "I've never denied that," I said quietly. "And I've spent years expressing my gratitude through generosity. But there's a difference between mutual support and systematic exploitation." "Exploitation!" Mom's voice rose with indignation. "How dare you use that word about your own family?" I took a deep breath, knowing the next move would escalate the situation dramatically. "I dare because it's accurate and because I have proof." I placed my phone on the table and played the recording from Friday. Their own voices filled the dining room, discussing me as a resource rather than a person. The casual cruelty of their laughter. The strategic planning of financial requests. Uncle Robert's ghoulish comments about estate planning. As the recording played, their expressions cycled through shock, embarrassment, anger, and finally desperate calculation of how to respond. When it ended, another heavy silence fell over the table. "You recorded us without consent," Uncle Robert finally said, his legal background surfacing. "That's potentially illegal depending on state law." It was such a revealing response. No denial, no apology, just immediate deflection and threat. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in the sound. "That's your concern right now?" Not that you were caught discussing how to position yourself to benefit from my death someday, but whether the recording would be admissible in court. You're taking everything out of context, Mom said, tears now flowing freely. We were just joking around. You know how families tease each other? That wasn't teasing, I replied. It was strategic planning, and it matches patterns I've documented for years without fully acknowledging them to myself. So what now? Dad demanded. You're wealthy beyond anything we could have imagined for you. Are you really going to hold it against us for asking for help? For wanting some comfort in our later years after all we sacrificed for you kids? His framing was so skillful, so practiced. For a moment, I felt the familiar guilt rising, the sense that I was being selfish for questioning their demands. I recognized it now as the emotional lever they had used for years to keep me compliant. I'm not holding anything against you, I said carefully. I'm simply acknowledging reality and making a decision based on that reality. Effective immediately, I'm stepping back from financial support for all of you. The explosion was immediate and multi-voiced. Sarah began crying about Zoe's future. James shouted about commitments I'd already made to his business. Dad's face turned alarming red as he accused me of betrayal. Mom covered her face, shoulders shaking with sobs. Uncle Robert began a lecture about family obligations that sounded rehearsed. I let the chaos continue for nearly a minute before raising my voice for the first time. Enough! Surprised by my uncharacteristic sharpness, they fell silent. Your reactions tell me everything I need to know, I said. Not one of you has expressed remorse for how you've discussed me behind my back. Not one has acknowledged treating me as a financial resource rather than a family member. Your immediate concerns are all about what you'll be losing, not about the damage to our relationship. You're being ridiculous, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Of course we care about you beyond your money. We're proud of your success. Are you? I asked, skimmed, because in that recording and in countless interactions, I can now see clearly the success itself means nothing to you, except for what it can provide. You've never shown genuine interest in what I've built or the work itself. That's not fair, Sarah protested. We're not business people. We don't understand all that tech stuff. You don't have to understand my industry to care about my passion, I replied, just like I don't understand Bradley's accounting work in detail, but I ask because I care that it fulfills him. I stood up suddenly, needing this conversation to end. I think it's best if everyone leaves tonight rather than staying until tomorrow as planned. You're kicking us out, Dad's voice was incredulous, over some comments taken out of context. I'm asking for space to process what I've learned, I corrected. The caretaker can arrange transportation for anyone who needs it. I've already booked hotel rooms in town for all of you. This is about control, Uncle Robert announced with sudden certainty. Amelia is having some sort of breakdown from work stress, and she's taking it out on her family. Perhaps we should consider an intervention, get her some help. The suggestion that I was mentally unwell for recognizing their manipulation was the final confirmation I needed. This was textbook gaslighting, an attempt to make me doubt my own perceptions, rather than acknowledge their behavior. I'm perfectly well, I stated calmly. I've simply removed the blinders I've been wearing about our relationship. Now please pack your things. Cars will be here in an hour. I left the dining room amid protests and accusations, retreating to my suite where I sat on the balcony overlooking the now dark lake. The voices from below continued, sometimes rising in volume, sometimes dropping to urgent whispers as they debated strategies. Not once did I hear anyone suggest that perhaps they should apologize or acknowledge what they had done. By midnight, the house was empty except for me and the ghosts of what I had believed about my family. I sat alone in the great room, watching moonlight pattern the floor through the windows, feeling simultaneously bereft and liberated. The illusion had been shattered, but with its destruction came a painful clarity. My phone began lighting up with messages almost immediately after they left. Mom claimed the stress had triggered a migraine, and she might need to go to the hospital. Dad sent a long email about how I had destroyed the family with my selfishness. James alternated between anger, after all I've done for you. though I couldn't imagine what that might be, and strategic apologies clearly designed to keep business funding intact. Sarah sent photos of Zoe with tear-stained cheeks, claiming my niece was devastated that Auntie Amelia didn't love her anymore. A manipulative move so transparent, it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. The drive back to Seattle the next morning was a blur. I moved through the following days in a state of emotional numbness, going through professional motions, while my personal life imploded. The only people I confided in were my friend Rachel, who had warned me about my family's behavior for years, and Dr. Winters, who provided a crucial anchor during therapy sessions. What you're experiencing is a form of grief, Dr. Winters explained during an emergency session. You're mourning the family you thought you had, the relationships you believed were based on love rather than utility. How could I have been so blind? I asked the question that had been haunting me day and night. Because you wanted to believe the best of them, she replied gently, and because the pattern likely began subtly and escalated gradually. Like the proverbial frog in slowly heating water, you didn't recognize the danger until it reached a critical point. The analogy was apt. What had started as genuine requests for help during times of need had evolved into systematic extraction disguised as family bonds, and I had allowed it, even enabled it out of love and a misplaced sense of obligation. The messages continued for weeks. Flying monkeys were deployed, distant relatives and family friends calling to tell me how devastated my parents were, how I should reconsider my harsh treatment of the people who had given me life and raised me. Each conversation revealed how thoroughly my family had controlled the narrative, casting themselves as victims of their ungrateful daughter's sudden wealth-induced cruelty. I held firm despite the emotional battering. For the first time in my adult life, I was prioritizing my own well-being over others' demands, and while the process was painful, it was also necessary for my survival. The weeks following the lake house confrontation were among the most challenging of my life. I implemented a complete financial separation from my family with the help of financial advisor Maxwell, who had been suggesting boundaries for years. We unwound joint investments, removed their names from accounts where they had been listed as authorized users, and created strict documentation for any past loans that had been casually arranged on family trust. This isn't just about protecting your assets, Maxwell explained during one of our meetings. It's about creating clarity going forward. Clear boundaries require clear systems. Simultaneously, I changed my personal phone number and created strict email filters that redirected family messages to a separate folder. I could check when emotionally prepared, rather than being ambushed throughout my day. The constant barrage of guilt accusations and occasionally threatening messages had been affecting my sleep and work performance. This digital distance provided critical breathing room. An unexpected ally emerged in Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, who contacted me after hearing the family's version of events. Unlike the other relatives who called to pressure me into reconciliation, Carol asked to meet for coffee to hear my perspective. When I hesitantly shared what had happened, her response surprised me. "I'm not shocked," she said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "Diana has always had a transactional view of relationships. She did the same thing to me after I received a modest inheritance from our grandmother. When I finally set boundaries, she spread stories about me being mentally unstable and ungrateful." Sound familiar? Carol's validation was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Knowing that the patterns weren't unique to my experience, that others had recognized and named the behavior, helped combat the gaslighting that had made me question my own perceptions. As summer faded into fall, and then winter, I faced my first holiday season without family contact. Thanksgiving loomed as a particularly difficult milestone. In previous years, I had hosted elaborate celebrations, providing everything from gourmet meals to travel arrangements for extended family. This year, silence stretched between us, broken only by occasional manipulative messages about how they would be suffering through the holidays without their daughter. The loneliness was real and painful, but so was the relief. No financial negotiations disguised as family gatherings. No strategic seating arrangements designed to position certain relatives near me for important discussions about their needs. No performance of gratitude that evaporated as soon as the checks cleared. Through Rachel's encouragement, I found a support group for people who had experienced family financial abuse. The stories shared in those meetings were startlingly similar to mine. Loving, generous people whose resources had been systematically drained by family members who viewed them as means rather than ends in themselves. Hearing their experiences and recovery journeys provided both validation and hope. It was at one of these meetings that I met Jackson, a software entrepreneur, whose family had extracted nearly $2 million before he recognized the pattern and established boundaries. Our shared experiences created an immediate connection that gradually evolved from friendship into something deeper. For the first time, I was building a relationship with someone who valued me completely separate from what I could provide materially. The difference, I told Dr. Winters during a session, is that Jackson asks what I need rather than what I can give. It's so foreign to me that sometimes I don't even know how to respond. As winter gave way to spring, I found myself building new traditions and connections that slowly filled the void left by family estrangement. Rachel and her husband included me in their weekly Sunday dinners. My executive assistant, Maria, invited me to her daughter's quinceañera, an honor that brought tears to my eyes. Jackson introduced me to his close-knit group of friends who welcomed me without agenda or expectation. Professionally, I channeled my energy into company growth, focused on employee well-being rather than just financial metrics. We implemented comprehensive benefits packages, flexible working arrangements, and career development programs designed to help everyone thrive. The culture shift resulted in both higher retention and increased productivity, reinforcing my belief that genuine care yielded better outcomes than transactional approaches. Inspired by my own educational journey and the financial barriers I had faced, I established a scholarship program for students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds pursuing technology careers. Each quarter, I personally mentored these students, finding healing in helping others overcome the same obstacles I had faced without creating dependency. 6 months after the confrontation, I realized one morning that I had gone an entire day without thinking about my family situation. The constant ache had receded from acute pain to a background soreness that occasionally flared, but no longer dominated my consciousness. I began sleeping through the night again. My focus returned to work. I found myself laughing genuinely at Jackson's terrible puns and Rachel's dramatic storytelling. Journaling became a crucial tool in my healing process. Each evening, I documented my thoughts and feelings, tracking the gradual shift from grief and anger to acceptance, and eventually a cautious peace. I wrote letters to my family that I never sent, expressing all the hurt, disappointment, and eventually forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for my own liberation from resentment. The first holiday season had been lonely, but the second was filled with chosen family. I hosted a Thanksgiving dinner for employees who couldn't travel home, creating a warm, joyful celebration without the undercurrent of financial negotiation that had characterized previous gatherings. For Christmas, Jackson and I volunteered at a local shelter, before spending a quiet evening exchanging thoughtfully chosen gifts that reflected genuine knowledge of each other's preferences, rather than price tags. My physical health improved as the chronic stress diminished. The tension headaches that had plagued me for years became infrequent. The persistent knot between my shoulder blades released. Even my skin cleared, and my digestive issues resolved physical manifestations of the toxicity I had removed from my life. I rediscovered hobbies and interests that had been sacrificed on the altar of work and family obligation. Hiking the magnificent trails around Seattle, playing piano, a childhood passion abandoned during the busiest years of company building, taking a ceramics class where I created lopsided bowls with more enthusiasm than skill. These activities reconnected me with parts of myself that had nothing to do with provision or productivity. Volunteer work at a women's shelter provided powerful perspective on gratitude and resilience. Witnessing women rebuild their lives after escaping abusive situations both humbled me and reinforced the importance of establishing healthy boundaries. During a holiday gift distribution event, a resident hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for seeing us as people, not problems." Her words resonated deeply, articulating exactly what I had needed from my own family. As the 1 year mark of our estrangement approached, I received an email from my mother saying she had been reflecting on her behavior and wanted to meet. After consultation with Dr. Winters, I agreed to a coffee meeting with clear time boundaries. The encounter was both better and worse than expected. Mom maintained respectful distance, initially asking about my well-being with what seemed like genuine interest. But 20 minutes in the conversation subtly shifted toward financial matters. Her new medical treatments not covered by insurance, Dad's desire to renovate their kitchen. I calmly stated, I notice we've moved from catching up to discussing financial needs. That's not something I'm willing to discuss. Her expression flickered between frustration and calculation, before settling on a practiced contrition. Of course, dear. I didn't mean to pressure you. I just thought you'd want to know what's happening in our lives. The meeting reinforced that while the physical distance had been maintained, the emotional patterns remained unchanged. I left with mixed feelings, sadness that authentic connection seemed impossible, but validation that my boundaries were necessary and appropriate. 2 years after that fateful weekend at the lake house, I had created a life rich in meaning and authentic connection. The company continued to thrive, expanding internationally with offices in London and Singapore. The scholarship program had grown to support 20 students annually. My relationship with Jackson had deepened into a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine care. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth, separate from what I could provide others. The painful journey had ultimately led to profound personal growth and a life aligned with my true values, rather than others' expectations. While the loss of family relationships would always carry a certain sadness, it no longer defined me or limited my capacity for joy. Today marks exactly 2 years since that confrontation at the lake house. Sitting in my home office overlooking the Seattle skyline, I reflect on the extraordinary journey from devastation to rebuilding. The path has not been linear, with periods of doubt, loneliness, and backsliding along the way. Yet overall, the trajectory has been toward healing and authenticity. My mother Diana reached out again about 6 months ago, her message noticeably different from previous attempts at contact. I've been seeing a therapist, she wrote, beginning to understand how my behavior has affected you. No expectations, but I would like to talk when you're ready. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Winters, I agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop. I prepared thoroughly, establishing clear boundaries and exit strategies if the conversation veered into manipulation. Jackson waited nearby, ready to provide support if needed. When my mother arrived, I barely recognized her. She seemed smaller somehow, less commanding than the woman who had orchestrated family dynamics for decades. Our initial exchanges were awkward, laden with the weight of unspoken history. I don't expect forgiveness, she said after we had settled with our drinks. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I want you to know I'm beginning to understand what we did to you, how we treated you as a resource rather than a daughter. The acknowledgement, something I had never expected to hear, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. We talked for nearly 2 hours, more honestly than we had in my entire adult life. She spoke of her own childhood financial traumas, how they had warped her understanding of love and security. This wasn't an excuse, she emphasized, but context she was only now beginning to recognize through therapy. Our relationship today is tentative and carefully bounded. We meet monthly for coffee with clear understanding that financial discussions are off limits. The connection is fragile, more acquaintance than mother-daughter. But it contains possibilities that seemed impossible 2 years ago. My father Thomas has made no such overtures. His pride, it seems, cannot accommodate the fundamental shift in power dynamics. Occasionally, Mom mentions him. But I've accepted that some relationships cannot be salvaged, no matter how much we might wish otherwise. James hit rock bottom about a year after our estrangement. His latest business venture collapsed. His apartment was lost to unpaid rent, and he faced the consequences of financial mismanagement without my safety net. Mom mentioned he had been sleeping on friends' couches when something unexpected happened. He sent me an email taking full responsibility for his behavior. I've been living like a parasite, he wrote bluntly, using you instead of supporting myself. I don't expect you to respond or help, but I needed to acknowledge what I did. I'm getting real help now. Cautiously, we've reestablished limited contact. He's working a steady job for the first time in his adult life, attending financial management classes. And according to his therapist, who he asked to speak with me, making genuine progress in understanding his entitlement patterns. We occasionally meet for lunch with the explicit agreement that money is not discussed. Sarah has been the most resistant to the new reality. Her occasional messages still contain subtle hooks designed to elicit financial support, though less frequently as time passes. Our contact remains minimal, primarily through birthday cards for Zoe, who remains my beloved niece despite the complicated adult relationships. The most unexpected family development has been my deepening relationship with Aunt Carol. She has become a genuine maternal figure, offering wisdom without demands and support without conditions. Our weekly Sunday phone calls have become a cherished ritual, and her pride in my accomplishments feels authentic in a way my parents' praise never did. Jackson has been my steadfast partner through this journey of family reconfiguration. 6 months ago, he proposed during a sunrise hike on Mount Rainier. The ring he offered was modest but meaningful, selected for its beauty rather than its price tag, a distinction that spoke volumes about our relationship's foundation. When we discussed marriage logistics, I suggested a prenuptial agreement not from distrust, but from hard-won wisdom about financial boundaries. Rather than offense, Jackson expressed appreciation for the clarity. Healthy love includes healthy boundaries. He said words that continue to guide our relationship. Through my experiences with the support group for financial abuse survivors, I've developed a philanthropic foundation focused on financial literacy and boundary education. The program works particularly with young professionals and newly successful entrepreneurs who, like me, may be vulnerable to exploitation from those closest to them. The most profound lesson from these 2 years has been learning to separate love from monetary support. Growing up with limited resources, I had unconsciously equated providing financially with providing love. My family reinforced this belief, creating a dynamic where my value is measured by what I could give rather than who I was. Now I understand that genuine love supports growth, independence, and healthy boundaries. It celebrates success without attempting to capitalize on it. It finds joy in connection, not extraction. This understanding has transformed not only my approach to family relationships, but to all connections in my life. My worth, I've finally internalized, has nothing to do with my bank account company valuation or material generosity. It exists independently of what I can provide to others. This simple truth, so obvious in theory, but so difficult to embody after years of conditioning, has been my most valuable discovery. The lake house that witnessed our family's unraveling has been sold. The painful associations outweighed any potential for creating new memories there. Instead, Jackson and I purchased a smaller waterfront cabin further north, where we're creating traditions centered around presence rather than presence. Friends gather for weekend retreats focused on conversation, outdoor adventures, and shared meals where everyone contributes according to their abilities and desires. As I look toward the future, I feel neither the naive trust of my past nor the wounded guardedness of the immediate aftermath. Instead, I carry a balanced awareness that some relationships can heal and transform, while others may need to remain in the past. Either outcome is acceptable when personal integrity and authentic connection are the non-negotiable foundations. For anyone listening who recognizes their own story in mine, who sees the patterns of financial exploitation disguised as family obligation, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-preservation and ultimately self-love. The path isn't easy, and the losses are real, but so is the freedom waiting on the other side. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you balance self-care with family expectations? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your own worth beyond what you can provide to others. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on your own path to authentic relationships and self-worth.